self-care. That's a word that we throw around a lot. It tends to come up when we mention mental health. And one of the aspects of CPT in particular, it asks us to start to do things for ourselves for no reason at all. And that might not seem like a very profound statement, but if we look at how we do engage in some fun behaviors, how we do reward ourselves, at times there can be contingencies. For example, there's a particular session in CPT where your provider will ask you, if you decide that's the route for you, they'll ask you to do something nice for yourself. And the common response I hear in individuals that are affected by trauma is, okay, I will, go get a massage. I'll, go get this great baked item or dessert that I've been looking at, and I'm going to work out really hard that day. I'm going to make the diet very strict prior. And that might not seem important, but if we look at what we're doing there, we're basically allowing ourselves something because of something else. And this exercise, while seeming very small, we want the person to experience that distress. We want them to notice that at times when they do nice things for themselves, for no reason at all, it feels abnormal. And we're starting to push back against some of those thoughts that trauma has affected. If we can get a person to that point where they're doing nice things for themselves for no reason at all, they're really starting to challenge some of those negative beliefs about the self. They're really starting to establish their self-worth. They're really starting to establish how they think and feel in the day-to-day. Another way to push back on some of those beliefs without directly getting at them, without directly discussing them within treatment, is to look at our exercise and how that might be impacting our mood. Some people might find that they are feeling very low. Trauma has affected them in the way that depression is pretty common, and frequent, regular exercise is something we can do that actually leads to mood enhancement. We know when we look at research, the common response prior to exercise is distress. People tend to understand how this is going to feel. They also tend to understand how they're going to feel after. That it lifts the mood, they feel better, they feel some achievement, they feel some competence. And we know that it can have impacts beyond just that slight mood enhancement. In mentioning self-care, we can start to look at some of the behavioral components of our lives. Fancy way of saying, what are we doing? What's the day-to-day look like? And you might not notice the links necessarily in terms of what you're doing and the thinking that's happening. And this is a way for us to really address some of the thinking in a more preliminary manner. If you don't want to jump straight into CPT, those 12 sessions, you may not have time for it now. That's fine. Let's start to dissect what our day-to-day looks like. And one of the great ways to do this is to identify how we treat ourselves. It's a way to look at our self-worth. And we'll ask you to basically have a day that you do something nice for yourself for no reason at all. There's a particular CPT session where I ask people to do this, and the responses when someone's experienced trauma and it's affecting them, responses are pretty typical. We can expect that there's almost this contingency. Often I'll hear someone say, hey, there's this fantastic cupcake place. I'm going to go there. I'm going to get this cupcake right after I work out really hard. Or I'm going to go get a massage because I've been saving all month long and I haven't done anything for myself. And that may not seem all that important. These are common behaviors, but sometimes these are linked to beliefs about self-worth. There may be a belief in there that we don't deserve these kind ways of treating ourselves. We don't deserve these aspects of life. And we're asking this person to start to look at some of those thoughts, look at these behaviors and what's behind them, and try to pick up on how they do view their self-worth, how they do view themselves. If they view themselves at times as needing to do X in order to get Y, if they have to sacrifice to get things that oftentimes they do for others. These acts of kindness that are typical in their day-to-day in relationships, they really aren't providing ourselves. That's cluing us in that there's some type of change we need in this belief here in terms of how we see ourselves in terms of our worthiness. You can see this contingency here, and the person might start to notice that this feels abnormal. feels uncomfortable. Good. That's good to hear. That means that they're starting to see that there's an area for change. Another way that we can focus on our self-care is in the literal behaviors, the exercise, what we're doing, our activity level. And we know that exercise can have a ton of beneficial effects. This isn't groundbreaking. We know that it improves physical health, but we also know that it can lead to some mood enhancement, some emotional boosts. It feels nice after the workout, not necessarily during the workout. It can also help us stave off depression. Recurrent depression is something that can be affected by frequent exercise. We can prevent some of those symptoms from coming back. Research supports those behaviors. We also see exercise combined with CBT, some of these cognitive behavioral therapy methods we're talking about. We can see that bring down things like A1C levels, and that's showing that our blood sugar is being controlled better. Now, I'm not a physician. Go to your primary care doctor for any information about your A1C, but this is speaking to the benefits of exercise in terms of our mental health, in terms of those depressive symptoms we can sometimes see coming up after trauma or after experiencing trauma. While I'm asking you to, potentially exercise more and saying, hey, look, short-term mood enhancement, long-term mood enhancement, preventing some depressive symptoms or recurrence of depressive symptoms, the common response is, no, that's too much. That's going to be too challenging. And this is very similar to that prolonged exposure, that hierarchy we talked about. We're not asking you to get on that elevator right now. We're saying, do anything. If it is walking, wonderful. Doesn't need to be a marathon right in this moment. You don't need to go do something profound. We know this is something that builds. And this mirrors a lot of this trauma-focused approach I've been discussing. It's asking us to very gradually start. Maybe it's walking to the front of the neighborhood today. Maybe it's there and back tomorrow. Maybe it's, riding the bike. And we're slowly building. And this whole time, I want to be observant. How is this affecting me? How am I feeling? Am I noticing changes in my mood? Am I noticing changes in my thinking patterns? That first crucial step is feel the emotions, identify them, put a label on them, and start to increase that awareness. How have I been affected? In the same way that exercise can be helpful for some of those depressive symptoms, we also notice it being very beneficial for anxiety. If I asked you to start to do some of these behavioral techniques, said, hey, let's start exercising more. Let's increase it. Let's go to the front of the neighborhood and back. Let's slowly ramp it up. You're going to start to notice some of these physiological sensations that are also common with anxiety. I described for you someone that's feeling very anxious, and this may resonate with you, a very anxious moment where you're noticing you're trembling, you're dizzy, you're shaking, you're breathing very deeply, you're sweating. It may resemble panic, it may resemble intense anxiety. It also lines up with exercise. It's also something that we do expect in those moments. We want you breathing more heavily when you're exercising. It's helping the body, it's helping it function. And as we get to that point that we start to push ourselves, maybe throw something like exercise back into our lives that we may have taken out after trauma, the brain can start to understand, the mind can start to understand what these sensations are. These physiological sensations can start to be experienced as safety signals. Oh, this is what I can expect when I'm exercising, versus these are coming up and it's a bad thing. We're starting to rewrite that these are distressing and showing the body and the mind these are okay. Another aspect of self-care is looking at the diet. And I'll preface this with, again, I'm not a dietitian. Consult with your doctor as far as the best diet for you. But we do have some research that shows that when we're dealing with depressive symptoms, changing the diet can actually lead to a reduction in symptoms. There's some research that looks at the Mediterranean diet, and it talks about bringing down these things that we know are helpful for us. Less processed foods, less sugar, more vegetables, more of these healthier foods we naturally know. And we start to notice the mood improving. And as I talk through this might sound like we're asking for that comprehensive approach, and we're not. We're asking for you to really try to take that view that you can grab these bits and pieces in your life and make small improvements where it will affect your mood. It will affect some of these symptoms you're experiencing. And most importantly, it's going to give you that understanding of what those links are. That awareness is really going to increase for you.